Thanks, Mehak. Thanks for having me today. Good afternoon, all. Before we start, I would like to thank someone who has been my source of inspiration and probably a short story where how this topic came into picture. Like, so why I chose this topic. So uh, this person is my source of inspiration, and I had a lot of things to learn from her. Um, she taught me how to think out of the box and how to enjoy whatever you're doing, be it small or big. And yep, so she's Hari. She's my daughter. And I believe we adults, we should all learn from kids because the kind of energy they have and then their thought process, we all had it once at some point of time, but then uh, as we grow up, we lose many of those tendencies. So the other day, I was babysitting her and we are playing some games, and out of the blue, she asked me a question, right? Usually how we ask children. So, Daddy, very good today. How was your work? Did you do a good job? And I knew something is coming up, and I said, "Yeah, of course, I did a very great job at job, and I've been really good." So, and then she runs and then gets a jar of chocolates. And before I protest, she says, "No, Daddy, it's not for me. It's actually for you for doing a great job in office." And I was extremely happy to get a reward from my daughter, sweet daughter. And then she popped one chocolate in my mouth, and it was really bliss because my doctor had kept me on a tight leash where I was not allowed to have anything sweet. So it was really a bliss to have a chocolate, and my mouth was full. And then she asked, like, "Daddy, do you think this another piece?" She takes out another piece and asks me, "Do you think this one will be as good as what you're having?" And before I could answer, she said, "Let me test it for you." And then she pops one in her mouth. So, and then we turn, and then the boss of my home, right, my wife, there is a cold stare in her face, and then I leave the rest to your imagination. So, when I think about this incident, what I understand is what she has done is something what we have in smart contracts. So there were two parties, and she smartly eliminated the authority figure, her mom, and she entered into a transaction, and it was extremely fast, if you see. So there were no waiting, there were no pleading, and she got what she wanted, and she was pretty smart in executing it. But then, why smart contract auditing? If you are not very careful about the way how you structure your contract, you get into trouble. You can all imagine what happened next when my wife saw both of us eating chocolates, which she wanted me to look after my kid, not to do that. So that's where you need to ensure that you do auditing and ensure that whatever the contract that is written is of good quality. Okay, moving on. How big is the smart contract market? So if you really look at the figures, in 2021, the market size was around 315 million. And as per research firms, we see that the projection for 2028 is close to 1,462 million, which is quite big. And compounded annual growth rate is at 24.2%, so which is pretty good. And when we look at the market share, right now, 43% of the market share is in North America, and followed by UK and Asia. So what it also means is that there is a large untapped market that is there, and when other countries start implementing smart contracts, so only that this market is going to grow even faster. So let's look at what smart contracts are. So they're digital codes used to exchange assets. That includes shares, money, property, without a need for any intermediary to function. So whenever you need to do some transactions, there is always a brokerage firm or a bank, or there is some intermediary that we have to depend on to do the transactions, which is enumerated in smart contracts. So how does it work? So we have to code the contract, and then once the contract is coded, the two parties agree, review the contract, agree to the terms, and then you push it uh, to the uh, to the production. And once the contract is pushed, so it becomes read only, and then the contract gets executed automatically when the necessary conditions that have been coded in the contract are met. So when you look at the benefits of smart contract, it's very secure because smart contracts are primarily used in blockchain, which is the backbone of these transactions and solutions. And uh, trying to hack a blockchain is super tough because you will be able to hack in only if you manage to modify more than 50% of the nodes, which is very difficult to do. And the transactions are autonomous. So, and because they are autonomous, they are very cost effective. There is no commission that needs to be paid, and there is no interruption because once you publish a contract, it's read only, and then there are no interruptions. So the contracts get executed as soon as the conditions are met. And because of all this, the performance is really fast, and it's a total fully automated system. The large use cases that would benefit out of smart contracts, way of using blockchains is government voting. So we do hear a lot of speculation that voting has not been done fairly, and there is a lot of it's very difficult to track whether the voting is happening without any external intervention. So, but then when you implement the voting using blockchain and smart contracts, so all of that uncertainty can be avoided. And when you use blockchain for storing data, Gartner publishes a report which says that the test data quality will tend to increase by 50%, which is quite a large percentage. And other areas for application are real estate contracts, where we can avoid a middleman from being there, supply chain management, mortgage systems, and insurance claims. So an example of insurance claim could be you take a travel insurance on a plane, and the insurer pays the insurance fee, which is $10, and then if the value of the insurance is $100, then $90 is paid by the insurance firm, and this is stored, and then the smart contract starts. So when the plane lands, and then the contract gets the information from airline, and then checks whether there is a delay in the flight, and if there is a delay beyond a certain thresholds that has been defined in the contract, then the total amount get transferred either to the person who has had bought the insurance of $100 or to the firm which has offered this in the case where airline reached the destination on time. So this entire process is fully automated. So there is no waiting time, there is no manual verification time, there is no need to follow up. So this kind of transactions are very highly secure and happens very fast. So now let's look at recent attacks. So does it mean that this is the next big thing to go for? Should all solutions be developed with blockchain as the backend? And is smart contracts the thing for the next emerging technology that is there? But then, though we say that smart contracts are secure, they can't be modified, it's all extremely difficult to hack. But then there have been a number of hacks that has happened in this area too. So in 2016, when you look at it, Genesis DO was hacked using a security loophole, and 50 million worth of revenue was stolen. And in 2017, Parity Technologies lost 150 million because of a vulnerability in Ethereum smart contract. And in 2021, recently last year, Poly Networks lost 613 million, which was a vulnerability in digital contracts. So what it also tells us is that the vulnerabilities are there, and hackers become more and more better in what they do. And when you look at the quantum of losses that are happening, so there is an exponential growth in the volume of losses that are happening because of this kind of attack. So all the more reason why smart contract audits are more important. So let's look at different types of attacks. So reentrancy attack is very damaging and is one of the most popular attacks that we come across. Short address, over and under flows, replay attack, reordering, front running, denial of service, insufficient gas briefing. So these are just a few popular attacks that I have listed here. There were a lot more vulnerabilities that we come across every day, and for interest of time, we'll quickly skip to the next area. And if you do have any questions on what these attacks are, how to prevent them, please feel free to reach out to me after the session. So why these attacks are happening? So what could be the key challenges? So when I look at industry standards, this is an emerging technology, and then industry standards are there, but then it has to be revised and then kept up to date as per the changing landscape that is there. Best practices, yes, large and small organizations are following best practices, but the best practices has to continuously evolve. And when I look at it, I do not see a best practice standard that is being published yet for all organizations to follow. Probably it will be coming in near future. And when I look at the tools, there are very limited tools for development and for QA and auditing. And industry is adopting this blockchain technology and smart contracts. It's very early into the game, and what we can surely expect is there could be a lot of changes and upgradations that will come in this area, and we'll have to be constantly keeping ourselves up to speed. So let's look at how do we do smart contract audit. So what is the focus of smart contract audit? So primary focus on smart contract audit is to look for the security of the code. So how secure is the code implementation that has been done? So somebody who's doing auditing, they look at the code and then they carefully look for any logical errors that are there which can lead to vulnerabilities. And the objective is to look for any data loss opportunities that can happen because of the way how the code is written, identify if there are any inefficiencies in contracts, the way they are created, and check for any security vulnerabilities or issues or misbehavior in terms of how contracts have been written. So the outcome of the audit usually is better optimized code, an improved performance because the code has been optimized, and it leads to an enhanced security and an assurance from for the development team that all the vulnerabilities, whatever that we already know of, have been checked for, and we do our best to ensure that there are no open vulnerabilities that are known. So let's look at the audit process. So audit process starts with the team gathering information, and with the information that is gathered on the system under test, we do a threat modeling, and which gives us various attack factors and user boundaries, system boundaries that are there. And once they are documented, then the testing starts. And testing involves doing tests both using automated tools and then a team doing the exploits manually. They do static code analysis and dynamic code analysis as well. Check application for vulnerabilities based on detailed checklist that we have. Check for functionality of the contracts, check for API security, network vulnerability assessment. All of this becomes part of the audit process. And once this testing is done, a detailed documentation is arrived at. So highlighting what findings have been found, and it's not only the document of findings, but it also gives developers a guidance on how these vulnerabilities can be addressed and what are the ways in which they can implement the fixes so that the vulnerabilities are avoided. And once the issues are fixed, then the team does another exploit or retest where they check whether all the vulnerabilities, whatever that has been identified, have they been fixed such a way that there are no further exploit that is possible. So this is the audit process. So apart from auditing, there are some best practices that if the team follows, then we can highly reduce the number of bugs that we can come across. So One of the primary things that I see in current delivery is everybody is doing agile, and I see that there is a lot of focus lost on documentation. So, but it is very important that a clear documentation of smart contracts, what is the objective of the contract, and if there are any assumptions are documented so that there are no information gaps. And then picture speaks 1,000 words. So always try to have a diagrammatic representation of schema and architecture, which brings in clarity. Keep as much code off chain as you can. Split logic into multiple contracts and then group similar functions. So design your code such a way that it is easy to read, easy to understand, easy to debug, and do it in small chunks, which is more manageable. And do not have long inheritance tree. Say, I generally see this tendency in developers where they feel that writing complex code is good, but then actually it is very harmful for in the long run, where when you have a very long inheritance tree, it's very hard to detect any bugs that are there, and then it's even harder to test it as well. So try to keep the inheritance tree to as small as possible. And frequently ignored items are logging events and operations. So I would urge developers to ensure that they have comprehensive logging of all events and operations that are there. It will really help you when you're debugging things later, like when something happens. Always use well-tested libraries. Embrace newer versions, but then check if those new libraries do not have any open vulnerabilities that are there. So avoid copy pasting code. Yeah, I know it's easy to just copy paste few lines of code, but then always use a dependency manager, because when you have to maintain your code, you change a version. It's easy with the dependency manager rather than having the same piece of code copied in multiple places, and that escalates into a technical debt later on. So after deployment, ensure that there is constant monitoring of the contracts, and always ensure that for any privileged users, you use cryptography to encrypt the transactions, as well as use secure wallets. And incident response plan is very important. So smart contracts and blockchain technologies are still vulnerable for hacking, and you should always have an incident response plan to initiate a plan of action when you do get hacked. So these are the best practices. And let's briefly look at the tools we use. So there's a short list of tools, and there are a lot more other tools that we use. So SWC is a weakness vulnerability library. So it's a large library of vulnerabilities that we use to use as a checklist for doing our audits. And this tool, we use it to fuzz Ethereum smart contracts and ERC20 tokens. So we have a collection of smart contract tokens which are affected, which helps us to check whether those vulnerabilities are there. We use Octopus for security analysis. It's a framework for doing security analysis on smart contracts. And we use Manticore for symbolic execution and analysis, Mythex for security analysis, and Inte for static analysis, and as well as smart check. So just a few collection of tools that we use. There could be a lot of other tools that are used by the team. I just picked the one that are most predominantly used ones. With this, I would conclude the session. So thank you all for being with me today. And now I believe we briefly understand what smart contracts are and why smart contract auditing is important. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.